Hello, this is a build guide for the Barbarian that I've been working on for the past few days. I made this build because all of the top Barbarian builds are following the same formula of using 3 shouts plus a core skill to do all of their damage, and I thought that was pretty boring. So I decided to see what I could come up with that does not make use of any of the shouts, and then I decided to take it a step further and remove the core skill as well. So this build does not rely on any shots or core skills, and it's actually surprised me with how effective and fun it is to play. I'd like to add a disclaimer here though. This build is definitely not more powerful than Hoda, and probably not as powerful as Whirlwind. If you're just looking to play the most powerful Barbarian build, this is not it. However, so far it's been plenty powerful enough for me, being able to clear content 10, 15, 20 levels higher than me with relative ease, and in my opinion it offers a much more nuanced and enjoyable gameplay than the meta barb playstyle of press your 3 shots on cooldown and hold down right click until everything is dead. If you'd like the TLDR version, there is some gameplay at the end of this video, and the build planner that I made on Maxroll is linked in the description. But with all that being said, let's get into the build and how it works, starting with my skills. So just to get right into it, how am I doing damage, how am I spending Fury without a core skill? It really comes down to 2 abilities and how they're working with each other. So the first one is Deathblow. Deathblow, it does a very large hit with an overhead attack, and if it kills the target, charge gets refunded. We're using the follow-up node. Obviously we have to take this one, deals double damage to bosses, very important. And then we're taking Warrior's Deathblow, which every time it damages at least one enemy, we gain Berserking for 3 seconds. Thanks to this, and with how often we're pressing Deathblow, we're pretty much always Berserking. The other ability, and what we're using to actually spend all of our Fury, since Deathblow does not cost any Fury, is Kick. So with Kick, we have the 2 follow-up points. The first point gives us vulnerable damage vulnerable every time that we damage an enemy with Kick. And it lasts 4 seconds, which is a pretty long time for most vulnerable effects. Most of them are like around 2 seconds. And then we're taking the Power Kick follow-up node so that if it damages an enemy, it consumes all of our Fury at once to deal a bunch of bonus damage. This really should not be thought of as just a Deathblow build, or it's more of a Deathblow and a Kick build. Both of these things work together, and they're very important, and they're both very capable of doing a lot of damage. I've one-shot elites with Kick. I one-shot elites a lot of the time with Deathblow. They're both very useful. So starting at the beginning of the tree, we take Lunging Strike, and we have to max it out because we don't want anything on the core tree. So we have to put all of our points into this to be able to move on into the defensive tree. So we take Lunging Strike because A, it gives us mobility. It lets us dash around the battlefield as long as there's targets to hit with it. And 2, it also lets us apply bleed, and this will be important later. The enhanced Lunging Strike doesn't really matter. So with our defensive skills, we're taking Iron Skin, and we're taking the follow-up node that lets it give us Fortify. And then we have 1 point in Imposing Presence, just 5% additional max health. We have to take at least 1 more point in order to get onto the brawling skills. An additional point in Iron Skin doesn't really do anything, and out of all of the other options, this seemed like the best one to me, but it's not super important. With the brawling skills, we're maxing out both Kick and Leap. With Kick, we know we're taking Power Kick, and then with Leap, we're taking Power Leap. This lets it generate 40 Fury. It actually generates even more than that because we have some Fury generation bonuses, like Prolific Fury here. And with those generation bonuses, Leap gives us a lot of Fury, and it's our main form of generating Fury is by hitting things with Leap. We also take the Berserking passives because, again, anything that has to do with Berserking is very powerful for this build because thanks to Warrior's Deathblow, we're pretty much always Berserking. So we have the damage reduction while Berserking, bonus Fury generation. For weapon mastery skills, we're obviously taking Deathblow with Warrior's Deathblow, and then we're putting 1 point in Hamstring. This is a staple for pretty much every Barbarian build out there, and always will be, because this lets all of our bleeds apply slow, and if the monsters are slowed, then we're benefiting from things like damage to slowed, damage to crowd controlled, obviously the damage to bleeding. This lets us benefit from just pretty much everything except for damage to stunned. And then we're taking just 3 points each in Pit Fighter and No Mercy for some passive stat bonuses. And then for our ultimate skills, we're taking Wrath of the Berserker. With this node, the Supreme Wrath of the Berserker, every 50 Fury we spend increases its damage bonus by 25%. Right now, with my gear and stats, I have a fury pool of 125, and since kick spends all of that at once, during Wrath of the Berserker, once I've used 2 kicks, I'm dealing like 125% multiplicative increased damage, which is a very large number. This is a very, very good interaction. And it's also another way of giving us Unstoppable. So we have a legendary aspect, which I'll get to in a minute, that lets Iron Skin give us Unstoppable, and this is our other method of getting Unstoppable to get out of CC. And we're taking Tempered Fury to get a bigger Fury pool, and Invigorating Fury to give us some life every time that we dump our Fury with a kick. You have 2 options for the key passives. Unconstrained is perfectly fine. One thing this has a really nice benefit over Walking Arsenal for is that the Berserking movement speed is really quite nice. And if you take Unconstrained as we're death blowing, we get up to that 10-second cap on Berserking duration. And that lets us get to the next pack faster, more consistently, because we have that 10-second timer of bonus movement speed from Berserking as we're running through. But actually in combat, it's only giving us that 25% multiplicative damage, which means it's definitely less than Walking Arsenal, because with Walking Arsenal, we get 45% multiplicative increased damage, plus we're still getting the base 25% from Berserking. So Walking Arsenal is clearly more damage, but Unconstrained is definitely good if you're doing lower tier content where you don't need that extra damage, and just the extra mobility of the extra Berserk uptime is better. That's really all of our skills, so I'm not going to talk about our Paragons. You can see in the max roll planner that's linked in the description my full Paragon setup and what I have planned. But for our gear, on our helmet we're running Iron Warrior, which is the one that causes our Iron Skin to give us Unstoppable and give us a bit of damage reduction. The biggest weakness of this build, just like any other build out there that isn't specifically a Triple Shout Barb or a Grizzly Rage Druid, is we can just get CC'd and perma-CC'd until we die if we don't have Unstoppable up. And we do not have super good Unstoppable uptime, so just be aware getting triple CC'd until you die is definitely a thing that will happen to you. And that's just kind of how it is until Blizzard fixes that. I'll talk about the chest last because it's kind of between 2 choices that I still haven't fully made up my mind on. With the gloves, we're running the Weapon Master aspect, which gives our Weapon Mastery skills an additional charge. This is extremely useful because it makes Deathblow much more forgiving. If the first charge doesn't kill, the second charge usually will, unless it's a super high HP target like a boss. And one really nice thing about this is that if Deathblow does kill and it resets a charge, it'll reset both charges. So if my first one doesn't kill and my second one does, I'm back up to 2 charges instantly, making it very, very flexible. With our pants, we're using a lucky hit to have a chance to gain Fortify. This is our main source of getting Fortify, and Fortify is our main defensive stat. It's how we're going to stay alive. And our lucky hit chance is actually pretty good because our Deathblow and Kick are both around 50 to 57%-ish. They're in that range. Lunging Strike's also 57%. And then Leap is 76%. So all 4 of these are relatively high lucky hit ratios, which means the Weapon Mastery having a lucky hit chance to stun, which I didn't mention, I am now, and then the lucky hit chance to gain Fortify proc reasonably often. And this is, again, the main way that I'm fortified for the majority of the time. With our boots, we're running with Kick resets the Leap's cooldown. This is super, super important because Leap is our best lump fury generator. So obviously it helps mobility because you can leap in, kick to kill the pack, and then leap again immediately. And that's great when you get the chance to do that. But also for killing high HP targets, you can kick them, dump all your fury, and then leap on them immediately after, which gives us a bunch of fury back. And having a bunch of fury come back right away is really nice because we're also running Edge Masters, giving us bonus damage based on our available primary resource. So the follow-up Deathblow can benefit from a higher Edge Masters multiplier, thanks to consistently being able to get that leap lump fury after every kick. The only unique that the build is super reliant on is Overkill. In the bludgeoning weapon slot, this causes your Deathblow to get a shockwave, dealing a portion of its base damage to enemies. And if they die to that shockwave, they also reset its cooldown. This makes it very consistent and gives the build some much needed range splash damage. You can see the range on it is actually surprisingly long. So that is Very, very important. The build technically works without it, but I feel like it would be really clunky. I've never played it, honestly, without this unique, but I feel like it'd be really clunky and a lot less reliable on having Deathblow charges available. On our two one-handed weapons, one that we're definitely going to be running is Retribution, which distant enemies have a chance to be stunned, doesn't really matter, but you deal a very large 40% up to 40% multiplicative increased damage to stunned enemies. Again, we have that lucky hit chance to stun every time that first Deathblow hits. So what'll happen a lot, especially against elites, is you Deathblow once, it doesn't quite kill them, but they get stunned, so the follow-up Deathblow gets this big multiplier, and they definitely die to the second one, resetting both charges, and you move on. The other one that I'm currently using is Brawler, which gives your kick, applies a debuff basically, where once the monster dies, it explodes. And this is surprisingly good. My character, it only says that it does about 4,000 damage, but you have to keep in mind that it benefits from all of your bonus damage sources. So stuff like Walking Arsenal being up, Berserking being up, Vulnerable, all of that applies. So for my character, this ends up being somewhere between like 15 and 25,000 damage. And that applies to everything that gets hit by the kick. And kick has a pretty reasonable AoE on it. So on big packs of smaller monsters with like one big elite in them, that one kick can do like 300k damage on top of the damage the kick already does. So that's a very, very nice way of converting AoE damage into single target damage, and also just making it a really nice AoE skill. This is, however, the aspect I think I'm going to drop. There's one aspect that I don't currently have. I'm going to put it on screen now. It causes every single kill that you get while berserking, which we're always berserking, gives you cooldown reduction on your brawling skills. And kick is very important to have on as low of a cooldown as possible because it's the enabler. Deathblow is already pretty good, but kick dumping all of our fury to give us triple damage death blows from this passive, where after spending 100 fury, your next weapon mastery skill deals up to 200% increased damage. This loop between these two abilities of building the fury, dumping, and then using a triple damage death blow is entirely reliant on being able to kick as often as possible. So that cooldown reduction on brawling skills I think is going to end up being better than the damage on kick. So on the amulet, I already said we're running Edge Masters, and then on one ring we're running Berserk Fury, which again we're always berserking. This just gives us passive fury per second while we're berserking, making sure we always have enough to kick whenever we need to. And we're using Berserk Ripping. Once I get the Brawler cooldown reduction aspect, that's going to go on this ring, and then the Berserk Ripping would replace the Brawler aspect. So that one would go. Last piece of gear is the chest. So the Rage of Harrogath would definitely be the best one. However, as of right now, as far as I know, Berserk Ripping, this bleed does not have a chance to trigger Rage of Harrogath. The Rage of Harrogath can only be triggered by skills that already apply bleed as part of the skill. And that's why we're running the bleed on our lunging strike. So this is actually, even though all of our abilities are applying a bleed thanks to Berserk Ripping, the bleed from lunging strike is actually the only thing that has a chance of proccing Rage of Harrogath. So I'm running this for specifically bosses because it lets me get to that third death blow faster. I've never had a boss live longer than 3 death blows. And it also can reset my Iron Skin when I'm fighting elites. If I'm, in a situation where I'm lunging striking, I have a small chance to get some Iron Skin cooldown reduction. If Berserk Ripping does get updated so that Rage of Harrogath works off of anything that applies a bleed, including from Berserk Ripping, then this will definitely be the best option. Mostly because of Iron Skin, partly because of kick. This will really, really, really enable the build. As of right now, it doesn't though. So the other option that I've tried out running on the chest is Anemia, which gives us another lucky hit effect. Doing direct damage against bleeding enemies has a chance to stun them. So this gives our death blow 2 separate lucky hit chances to stun. Like I said, if the first death blow stuns, the second death blow is almost guaranteed it's going to kill the target and give you the reset on both. So I would just recommend trying out both of these. You could also, if you wanted to, run another defensive power here, like Disobedience for armor stacking on doing damage, or Might for damage reduction whenever you would basic attack. We do Lunging Strike fairly often. so the uptime on that would be pretty good. I still bounce back between these two. But either way, if this ever gets updated so that Berserk Ripping works with Rage of Harrogath, this will definitely be the way to go. Some key stats to look for are ranks to Deathblow on your helmet, which I don't currently have. I do have, on a high enough item power one, you can get up to 4 ranks of Deathblow on your helmet, which is a huge damage increase. I have a helmet with plus 4 ranks of Deathblow sitting in my stash, but I'm waiting on another Iron Warrior aspect to put it on there before I can use it. Then on the amulet, you can get plus 3 to all weapon mastery skills, which I have, which is another big multiplier to Deathblow damage, and plus 3 to all brawling skills, which I didn't mention it, but leap and kick, getting really high ranks in both of these is also very, very good. Not because it increases their damage, because it doesn't. Neither of them get their damage increased at all by putting ranks in them, but it does reduce their cooldowns. So that's why kick is especially high priority. Mine is up to rank 12. You really want to have this at as high of a rank as possible, which I think 12 is the cap for it. With plus 4 ranks of kick on the pants and plus 3 brawling skills on the amulet, I think that's the most you can get for kick. So I have plus 4 ranks of kick on the pants, I have 3 to weapon mastery and 3 to brawling skills on the amulet, and then ideally you would have ranks to Deathblow on the helmet. We're not using any core skills, so your gloves are freed up to be anything else. They don't need ranks to a core skill on them. Mine have int on them, which is not good, but it is what it is. You can look at that link on Maxroll. I've listed what I think are probably the best stats for each piece. And very last thing is our weapon expertise. We're using two-handed axe to give us 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. We don't need the bleed from two-handed sword because we're using Berserk Ripping. And two-handed mace is okay, but we don't stun often enough for me to super like it. I'm currently using a two-handed axe. This is not ideal. Ideally, this would be a two-handed sword, and that's reflected in the Paragon tree. We're using the Seethe glyph, which gives you bonus damage while wielding a sword. Ideally, we're using a two-handed sword here for the implicit crit damage stat, and ideally the Deathblow is using that sword. One other thing to talk about is while you're using Weapon Mastery as or Walking Arsenal, excuse me, as your key passive, you need to make sure that your Leap, Lunging Strike, and Deathblow are all using different weapon types so that you can enable all 3 Walking Arsenal passives. So just Deathblow needs to be the highest damage two-handed weapon, which for me right now is my Overkill. The other 2 don't matter. I have Lunging Strike as my 2 one-handers and Leap as my slashing weapon, but it's not important. The only important one is having Deathblow be the highest damage weapon and having all 3 of them be different so you can actually enable your Walking Arsenal. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the build and how it functions. I do have a little bit of gameplay to show you from a run I did earlier today. There's just a couple of things that I want to mention with this. First off, being that you want to watch how you position, because you want to be on the edge of the pack so that your shockwave from your Deathblow is traveling through everything and hitting as many things as possible, and it's just feeding you resets as consistently as possible. Use your Lunging Strike and your Leap to move around the battlefield, get to priority targets. Your Leap, you have to remember, has to hit something to give you its Walking Arsenal passive. It doesn't have to be a monster, it can hit a destructible object, but it has to hit something in order for you to benefit from your full Walking Arsenal. And just make sure you're rotating between your kick and your Leap as much as possible, and trying to, on elites in particular, you doing the triple damage death blows as much as possible, dumping with kick right before Deathblow every time. If it's a particularly high HP monster, so something like a boss or a single elite pack where they have a bunch of HP, you want to get up to max fury, kick, and then leap right away, Lunging Strike a couple times to build your fury, and then Deathblow, so that the Deathblow benefits from as much of Edge Masters on the amulet as possible. I will say, this does take a bit of practice of getting an idea of what things are going to die to your Deathblow and what things aren't. Because if you ever get stuck in a situation where you've used both Deathblow charges and nothing died, it feels really bad. You're basically running in circles for like 12 or 13 seconds waiting for it to come back, because that's like all of your damage is gone. And it feels pretty bad when you first start out, but once you get used to it, I've gotten pretty used to it, does not happen that often, and the build phase plays very smoothly and it plays very consistently. And it's a lot of fun. It's fun having that combo element to it of the kick into the death blow instead of just holding down Hoda and doing a bunch of damage. So that's my build. I've been having a lot of fun with it the past few days. It's the most fun I've had playing Diablo 4 so far. I hope you give it a try. If I've missed anything, then please feel free to leave a comment. I try to answer any questions that I see as long as I do have an answer. And just make sure to check out the Maxroll build planner link in the description for anything like stats or the Paragon boards or anything like that. But thanks for watching. Bye bye.
We have caught 4 stags, 6 does, 10 quill rats, 3 rabbits, and are on the trail of what could be 3 large bears. Some do not want to tempt fate by hunting such fearsome creatures. I say, when will we have this chance again?